Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we're going to be going over my tier list for patch 12.14. But before we jump into that real quick, just want to introduce kind of some really important parts of the patch that's going to be hitting so that you can kind of know what my thought process is and what's going into how we've juggled around a lot of our tier lists, since you're going to see a lot of changes and a lot of move arounds for a lot of characters. So, most important things really are a couple of changes to itemization in the game. So enchanter items are receiving some small marginal nerfs on all of their bonus healing and shielding by 2 or 4%, and Moonstone is going to also receive a 5% nerf. These nerfs will be relatively noticeable, but I don't actually think they're that big of a deal comparatively to kind of just the landscape of the game being changed. So, for those who don't know, health potions. This is actually an incredibly important part of everything. Health potions are now going to be healing for a lot less. They're going to be losing 30 healing, which is 1/5 of their healing power. And refill potion is also receiving a nerf from 125 to 100. Also, corrupting potion receiving the same exact nerf. Because of that, and also biscuit delivery nerfs, this means that there is less sustain in laning phases. And also for people who don't play as support as much, things like bone plating, conditioning are receiving nerfs, guarding is having an increased cooldown, and really this big thing right here, which is second wind taking a nerf, and Scorch receiving a huge buff. Now, at the time I'm recording, I've actually played with these changes, so I can definitely and confidently say that these are noticeable changes, especially the Scorch one. Especially in the early laning phase, Scorch was coming relatively competitive with my Comet, even though my Comet was between 75 and 80% accuracy. So, as you can see right here, there's big nerfs to sustain in lane. And another thing to note too is dragons. And neutral objectives in general. So dragons now will be a lot tankier and a lot harder to kill, but will do a bit less damage. But in doing so, all of the buffs receive 50% buffs. So for example, you can see right here, 6% attack speed ability haste from the Hex tag is going up to 9%. So this means that neutral objectives are very, very valuable. Also, Rift Herald will now be giving 200 local gold to the people who kill it also. So this means neutral objectives really worth a lot of value. So that what that means is push and pressure in lane becomes premium. Beforehand, I would probably say that, having like a good team fight composition, good stable compositions in general feel really, really strong. But now, if you can get those neutral objectives early, this gives you a huge advantage in the game. Plus, it's a lot easier for you to secure just because poke sticks harder. So, let's first off jump into our S+ characters.
Warning, warning, warning.
Which are going to be Zyra and Ashe. Now, these characters utilize Comet exceptionally well, are really, really strong poke characters who have a couple of things that other supports don't have. Number one is they have brush checking. And this is a pretty important thing when it comes to controlling vision or retaking vision a lot of times. Sometimes it can be really unsafe, especially while playing ranged characters, to retake space. These characters both have these solutions involved. Also, their laning phases are very, very powerful now that the Scorch buffs have gone through and the potion nerfs have gone through also. They poke from really far away, and they both access the domination tree a lot. Really, really well with the Ultimate Hunter and, Treasure Hunter as options for either of these characters. And so Taste of Blood has become one of the things that I think is a premium level rune for laning phase, because now sustain has been hit relatively hard, I would say, 20-30%, and they've bumped up Scorch numbers, so poking is more valuable. And so having things like Taste of Blood and being able to poke back on people and sustain yourself up and make up for the fact that you have less power in potions is really huge. These characters do that super well. Obviously, these characters function completely differently. Ashe is a hit level 6 can engage kind of character, whereas Zyra is a kite back and poke character, but they fulfill a lot of the same pressure lane roles in most cases. And that's why they come in at S+. So they kind of check all my boxes for really what I love to see, and they're relatively easy to play and easy to access poke for, just because of the plants, auto-targeting players, and volley just being an easy skill shot to hit. Hey guys, if you're deciding that, maybe you want to pick up one of those Star Guardian skins, don't forget to use my creator code right here, and you can help support the stream and the content that's coming out. Appreciate it a lot, guys. Let's move into S. And honestly, a lot of these characters can interchange depending on matchups. These are kind of characters that are pretty strong, but can be kind of up or down depending on their matchups. So I'm a big fan of these characters. A lot of them are either, poke or anti-poke characters in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. So let's first, drop down to maybe kind of the similarities of poke with our enchanters and long-range poke characters. So we see here we have Karma, Xerath, Brand, Vel'Koz, and Lux. All these characters are great poking characters, but, sometimes they don't quite have all the checkboxes, right? They don't have, brush checking nearly as well. Maybe they're a little bit more immobile. They're a little bit tougher to hit their skill shots of and get poke off. But all of these characters are really, really potent when it comes to being able to poke. I'm actually going to move Brand down. Being able to poke enemy players. So these are really great lane busters, do really well in lane, utilize gold relatively well, which is kind of one of the drawbacks of the characters too, is I feel like if they don't get as fed, they're a little bit on the weaker side of things. And Karma, is kind of the premier poke enchanter support. So I like her a lot, especially if you can pair her with something like an Ezreal or an Ashe or a Jhin that can poke back with this character. After that, we have kind of the bread and butter sustain characters. So obviously, as poke is premium, what counters poke is sustain. Now a lot of people will probably ask me, well, I mean, if poke, if sustain counters poke, why are these not in the S pluses? The reason why I would say that is that they don't offer a lot of ways to win lane. They just have offerings for neutralizing lanes. So like if you're playing a Yuumi or a Nami or a Sona, you're probably going to get through laning phase pretty comfortably against a lot of poke characters, but you don't have nearly as many options to win the lane. Whereas, if you hit a good root on Zyra or, Ashe Arrow at level 6, you have a lot of kill pressure, where I think that is just a lot more difficult to execute when you're playing a lot of these sustained characters. So I like these characters, and I think they're actually pretty good neutralizing effects. But they might be a little bit harder to carry on since they don't have their own way to start fights or way to, functionally initiate or poke or put pressure on people. They have to do a lot of reactive playing. So that's why they're still in the S. But, with certain combinations, I think that they can be S pluses, especially. Still think that lanes like Lucian Nami is really, really powerful right now. And also things like Yuumi Sivir. And then kind of the oddball out is going to be Pyke. The reason why Pyke comes in as an S tier character is just because he kind of counters everything that I put here. But he has, a skill capacity. He is a tough character to just pick up immediately and perform on. So he is not an S plus character. He is just an S because I value, time invested and output value of the character. So Pyke, character that has built-in sustain for himself. He is tough to poke out of lanes and just has a lot of ways to force and score kills on the laning phase. Plus, if he ever does getting going, then it's just really easy for him to continuously kill lanes over and over again. And remember, one of the things that I talked about earlier is being able to brush check, etc. Well, a lot of these characters don't have great ways to take vision back, and if you are getting ahead on a character like Pyke, it's very easy for you to buy Umbral and just control vision and score kills over and over again. Plus, you're printing gold for either yourself or your teammates, so he definitely really extends that advantage, especially post level 6, on killing people. Honestly, I think that if you play a good Pyke, he is definitely S plus and maybe even better than Ashe and Zyra. I would almost say that a lot of times in my solo queue games nowadays, I find myself banning Pyke just because I feel like he is so good against a lot of these characters. And then moving down to A, which is kind of like the playable, but like don't recommend playing them as frequently, like the S and the S plus. This patch, there's a lot of them, and I would recommend mostly playing them. But you can play these characters if you have like either good lane pairings or you're just really comfortable with the character. Is Leona Nautilus, right? We still have the tried and true engaged supports. They're a little bit harder to play, obviously, because if you make one mistake or lose a chunk of your HP early on, it becomes a lot harder for you to have kill angles on it. Same with characters like Rakan, but Rakan more so lacks damage rather than lockdown and sustain. Then I've been a big fan of Malachi's support. If you watch my stream at all, I've been playing him a ton. He just retakes vision and pokes people really well. I don't recommend playing him nearly as much to most people, but if you're really good about your time management and you set up saplanes beforehand, you can actually do a lot of damage to a lot of people, especially if they don't have good sustain. Renata kind of goes down to the A tier also because, I just think that poking characters are really great, so it's harder to play Renata against them. But if the enemy team has a lot of melee characters besides maybe your bot lane matchup, she can still be pretty great. And also, she still pairs really well with Kalista. After that, Seraphine received actually a ton of nerfs, so I don't even know if I have actually like her in the A tier, but I'm going to leave her here for right now just until I've seen more games of her. Relatively, though, she kind of struggles against poke for the most part, and you have to shield. Your shield is on a really long cooldown, so I don't recommend playing her as much. And Lulu kind of goes down to the A tier also, which is, Lulu and Janna go down here for the same reason Soraka does. All of these enchanters do quite poorly against poke. Even though they can shield or heal, it just seems like poke comes in at a higher frequency than the shielding and healing can come in. Plus, Soraka also struggles against matchups where she's outranged because it's really tough for her to hit her Qs. After that, I think that Senna actually received pretty huge nerfs over and over again sequentially, and also now that potions are a lot weaker, it's harder for you to play aggressively and wrestle pressure in the early stages of laning phase, so it's just harder for you to build souls. I think that in some cases, if you're playing Senna against a Yuumi or a Sona, then she does go back up to S tier, but in general, when she's against poke characters, she definitely tends to struggle because it's just hard for her to cycle her souls. And then I think actually characters like MF support can actually fight back against a lot of these poke characters, but she's a little bit on the weaker side because I just think her builds are a bit more expensive, and proficiency-wise, she's a little bit tougher to play than other AP supports. And same thing with things like Bran. Outside of that, most of the things that are under B or C or D, I don't really recommend playing. A is kind of like that you're pushing it, but you can maybe play it and maybe make it work if you're playing the character well, or it's good synergy or a niche counter pick. But outside of that, I recommend you playing the S and the S Plus because they're just good, stable, and strong for the current meta. So yeah, that pretty much is it. Let me know in the comments, what characters were you really excited for to play in the new patch. It's kind of a huge shakeup in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. And, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment in the section below, and hit that bell and whistle. I'll see you next time. Peace.